The blue waters of Kaltoria churned violently as another thermal wave swept through the eastern seabed. Inside the central communication hub, Elder Zoran pressed his webbed hand against the cool glass, watching bubbles rise from the new cracks in the city dome. "How much time do we have left?" he asked, his voice low and strained. 3 months at most," replied Mira, the head scientist. Her gills fluttered with anxiety. "The sun's radiation is heating our oceans faster than predicted. Soon, nothing will survive." Zoran nodded slowly. "Send the message. Send it to everyone." Within minutes, the most powerful signal Kaltoria had ever generated shot outward into space, carrying their desperate plea in 17 different languages. "Our world is dying. We need evacuation. Please help us." 47 light-years away, in the Nevada desert, Alan Miller yawned and stretched in his chair. The night shift at Earth's Deep Space Listening Post was usually quiet. At 32 years old, Alan had spent 7 years listening to the static of space, occasionally picking up signals from Earth's own satellites and probes. The soft beeping startled him. Alan adjusted his glasses and leaned forward, watching as strange symbols scrolled across his monitor. "What the hell?" he muttered, quickly typing commands to record and analyze the signal. The computer worked for several minutes before producing a rough translation. Alan read it twice, his heart racing. He reached for the phone and dialed his supervisor. "Dr. Wright, you need to come in. Now." By morning, the message had been confirmed by listening posts in Australia, South Africa, and Japan. Dr. Susan Wright stood before a hastily assembled team of scientists and government officials, her normally neat brown hair disheveled from a sleepless night. "The signal comes from a star system we've only recently begun to study," she explained, pointing to a map on the wall. "It's definitely not human in origin, and the message appears to be a distress call." "You're saying aliens are asking for help?" asked General Frank Wade, his voice heavy with skepticism. "That's exactly what I'm saying," Susan replied firmly. "And based on the strength and clarity of the signal, they're far more advanced than we are." Alan spoke up from the back of the room. "There's something else. The message wasn't just sent to us. It was broadcast to specific coordinates throughout the galaxy. They're asking everyone for help." 1 week later, Alan sat with Susan in the monitoring room, tracking communications across all frequencies. They had expected to hear responses from other advanced civilizations, perhaps even catch snippets of rescue plans being coordinated. Instead, there was nothing but silence. "I don't understand," Alan said, rubbing his tired eyes. "If these Kaltorians have been in contact with other species before, why isn't anyone responding?" Susan frowned at the screens. "Maybe no one else received the message." "Impossible. Their transmission technology is leagues beyond ours. If we got it, so did they." The door opened and a woman in a crisp uniform entered. Lisa Ortiz, commander of the International Space Fleet. "The United Space Coalition is meeting in Geneva tomorrow," she announced. "They want both of you there. Have we decided to respond?" Susan asked hopefully. Lisa's expression was grim. "That's what we're going to determine. But I should warn you, many nations think we should stay out of it. They believe we lack the technology and resources for an interstellar rescue." Alan stood up, his face flushed with anger. "So we just let them die? An entire civilization?" "It's not that simple," Lisa replied. "We've never encountered alien life before. There could be political implications we can't even imagine." "With all due respect, Commander," Susan said quietly, "this isn't about politics. It's about doing what's right." As they argued, the screens behind them continued to monitor the silence of the stars. Countless advanced civilizations had received the same plea that Earth had, yet not one had responded. In the darkness of space, a desperate message continued to echo. "Our world is dying. We need evacuation. Please help us." And only humans were listening. The Geneva Conference Center buzzed with nervous energy. Representatives from 37 nations sat around a massive oval table, their faces grim. Large screens on the walls displayed data about the Kaltorian signal and their dying planet. Alan Miller fidgeted in his seat next to Dr. Susan Wright. They were not used to being among world leaders and military commanders. Susan squeezed his arm gently, a silent reminder to stay calm. "Let's begin," said President Laura Chambers of the United Space Coalition. Her gray eyes scanned the room. "We all know why we're here. An alien civilization has asked for our help. We need to decide if Earth will answer." The room erupted in voices. "It's clearly a trap," said the Russian representative. "Why would advanced aliens need our help?" "We have only 3 ships capable of long-distance space travel," added the Chinese delegate. "This mission would leave Earth defenseless." "What if they bring diseases?" someone else called out. "Or their biology is harmful to humans?" President Chambers raised her hand for silence. "Dr. Wright, please share your findings." Susan stood, her voice steady despite her nerves. "The Kaltorians are an aquatic species. Their planet is heating rapidly due to changes in their sun. According to our calculations, they have less than 3 months before their oceans become too hot for survival." "And you're certain they contacted other civilizations?" asked the Japanese representative. Alan spoke up. "Yes, sir. We've detected signals sent to at least 16 other locations, but there's been no response from anyone." A heavy silence fell over the room as everyone considered this information. Millions of miles away, Elder Zoran swam slowly through the memorial garden. The beautiful coral structures, built to honor Kaltorian ancestors, were already beginning to bleach and die in the warming waters. Young Kaltorian children darted between the coral, playing games while they still could. Zoran watched them with a heavy heart. Soon, this would all be gone. "Any responses?" he asked as Mira approached. She shook her head sadly. "Nothing from the Vexari. Nothing from the Talaxians. Nothing from anyone." "How is this possible?" Zoran's voice trembled. "We've traded with these civilizations for centuries. We've shared knowledge, resources. There is one strange signal," Mira said hesitantly. "It's very weak, using primitive technology. We can't be sure, but it might be from Earth." "Earth?" Zoran's eyes widened in surprise. "The developing world. They barely have space travel." "It's probably nothing," Mira admitted. "Their technology isn't capable of reaching us in time." Zoran looked back at the playing children. "Send them our coordinates anyway. At this point, we can't afford to ignore any possibility." Back in Geneva, Commander Lisa Ortiz stood to address the room. Her uniform was perfectly pressed, her posture rigid with determination. "I understand everyone's concerns," she began. "Yes, this mission is risky. Yes, our technology is limited. But I keep asking myself one question. What kind of species do we want to be?" She walked around the table slowly. "Throughout human history, we've struggled with fear of those who are different. We've fought wars over those fears. But we've also built rescue teams that run into burning buildings. We've sent aid to countries after natural disasters, even to our enemies." Lisa stopped and looked directly at President Chambers. "If we ignore this call for help when we have the means to try, what does that say about humanity? If advanced civilizations are watching us right now, let them see that humans help those in need, no matter who they are or where they come from." The room fell silent again, but this time it was different. People exchanged thoughtful glances. An elderly African representative stood slowly. "My country has little to contribute to this mission, but my people know what it means to face extinction while the world watches. We vote yes." One by one, other representatives began to voice their support. President Chambers called for an official vote. The result was close. 21 countries voted to help, 16 voted to ignore the plea. "Then it's decided," she announced. "Humanity will answer the call." As the meeting adjourned, Alan turned to Susan, his eyes bright with emotion. "We're really doing this," he whispered. "We're going to save them." Susan nodded, but her expression was serious. "Now comes the hard part." figuring out how. The launch day arrived faster than anyone expected. 3 months of round-the-clock work had transformed Earth's experimental deep space vessels into rescue ships. The U.S. Hope, U.S. Mercy, and U.S. Compassion gleamed in the morning sunlight at the International Spaceport in Arizona. Captain Daniel Garcia stood before his crew on the main deck of the U.S. Hope. At 45, he had never imagined commanding humanity's first major interstellar mission. "Today, we make history," he said, his voice carrying to all corners of the ship, "not just because we're traveling farther than any humans before us, but because we're doing it to save lives. Remember why we're here." The crew, a mix of military personnel, scientists, engineers, and medical staff, nodded solemnly. They all knew the risks. The experimental fold drive had only been tested on unmanned probes. No human had traveled beyond Mars using the technology. "Captain," called Communications Officer Olivia King, "final systems check complete. All ships report ready for departure." Daniel took a deep breath. "Then let's go save some aliens." The first jump through fold space made half the crew sick. Chief Medical Officer Patricia Lopes worked tirelessly, treating cases of extreme vertigo and nausea. "It's like the worst seasickness you can imagine," she explained to Daniel as they walked through the crowded medical bay. The human body wasn't made to bend through space-time. By the second week, most had adjusted. The fleet settled into a rhythm. Jump, recover, prepare for the next jump. Each leap brought them millions of miles closer to Kaltoria. In the science lab, Nathan Porter hunched over displays showing the Kaltorian star system. "Something's wrong," he muttered as Olivia entered with his coffee. "What is it?" she asked, setting down the cup. Nathan pointed to his readings. "The star's deterioration is accelerating. At this rate, Kaltoria will be uninhabitable before we arrive." Olivia's face paled. "Have you told the captain?" "I'm about to. We need to push the engines harder." In the navigation room, Commander Ben Lewis studied the star charts with growing concern. "We're approaching Vexari territory," he informed Daniel. "According to the universal star maps the Kaltorians sent, the Vexari are extremely territorial. They require all ships to stop for inspection." Daniel frowned. "How long would that delay us?" "At least 3 days. Maybe more if they decide to be difficult." "We don't have 3 days to spare," Daniel said firmly. "Prepare defensive systems, but maintain course. Maybe they'll understand our hurry when we explain." 2 days later, the fleet reached the border of Vexari space. The crew tensed, weapons systems on standby. They waited for the inevitable confrontation. Nothing happened. "This doesn't make sense," Ben said, checking sensors again. "There should be patrol ships, maybe even a station." Olivia listened intently to her communications equipment. "I'm not picking up any chatter. It's like there's no one here." Daniel studied the empty space around them. "Continue forward, but stay alert. Something's not right." By the 3rd month, the strain was showing on everyone. Sleep-deprived engineers worked constantly to keep the fold drives functioning. Food rations were cut to stretch supplies. In his private quarters, Daniel reviewed Nathan's latest report. The situation was worse than they thought. Kaltoria was dying faster than expected, and there was no way to warn the Kaltorians that help was coming. Their communications couldn't reach that far ahead of them. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. It was Susan Wright, who had joined the mission as scientific advisor. "Captain, the crew is asking questions," she said quietly. "They've noticed we're pushing the engines beyond safety limits." Daniel sighed heavily. "Tell them the truth. We're in a race against time, and we're currently losing." Susan nodded, then hesitated. "There's something else. Olivia has been monitoring all channels during our journey. There's still no chatter from any other rescue missions. As far as we can tell, no one else is coming to help the Kaltorians." Daniel stared out his small window at the stars streaking by. "Then we better not fail," he said. Dropping out of fold space in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The ship shuddered as the U.S. Hope returned to normal space. On the bridge, Captain Daniel Garcia steadied himself against his chair, then looked up at the main screen. Kaltoria filled the view, a beautiful blue planet with swirling white clouds. Under different circumstances, the crew might have cheered at their first sight of an alien world. Instead, they stared in silent horror at the visible disturbances in the planet's oceans. Even from orbit, they could see massive steam clouds rising from the waters. "Life signs?" Daniel asked quietly. "Confirmed," replied Science Officer Nathan Porter. "Concentrated in underwater structures. I'm detecting cities, Captain, but the ocean temperature is reaching critical levels. Any other ships in the area? Any sign of other rescue missions?" Nathan checked his readings again. "None, sir. We're the only ones here." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Olivia, open a channel to the surface." Communications Officer Olivia King worked her console. "Channel open, sir. This is Captain Daniel Garcia of the Earth vessel U.S. Hope. We received your distress call and have come to assist in evacuation. Please respond." For several long moments, there was only static. Then, a voice, slightly distorted but understandable, came through. "Earth vessel, is this real? You actually came." 2 hours later, Daniel stood in the ship's conference room with Elder Zoran, who had been brought aboard in a specially designed water tank. The Kaltorian's blue-green skin shimmered under the lights, his large black eyes studying the humans with a mixture of hope and confusion. "Forgive my surprise," Zoran said, his words translated through a device floating beside him. "We sent distress signals to 17 advanced civilizations. Many have been our allies for centuries. We trade with them. We share knowledge with them." His voice became softer. "We thought they were our friends." Mary Peterson, the cultural liaison, stepped forward. None of them responded. "Not one," Zoran replied. "Yet you humans, a species we know only from intercepted transmissions, crossed the stars to help us." Daniel exchanged glances with his officers. "We couldn't ignore a cry for help." "Your technology is less advanced than we expected," Zoran observed, looking around the ship. "How did you manage to travel so far?" Chief Engineer Harold Wilson spoke up proudly. "We adapted an experimental full drive, worked round the clock to get these ships ready." 3 ships, Zoran mused. "How many Kaltorians can you evacuate?" An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Harold looked down at his tablet, then met Zoran's gaze. "With all 3 ships at maximum capacity, about 30,000. Zoran's skin darkened, a sign of distress, Mary had learned. "There are 50,000 of us." The implications hung heavy in the air. Even after Earth's remarkable journey across the stars, they couldn't save everyone. Down on the planet, Susan Wright stood on a floating platform above one of the main Kaltorian cities. The protective suit she wore kept her dry, but she could feel the water's heat even through the insulated material. Beside her, a young Kaltorian named Nira guided the platform through the city. Massive dome structures housed thousands of residents. Many were already showing signs of heat stress, their movements sluggish. "These buildings have stood for 1,000 years, Nira explained. "The Great Library alone contains knowledge collected over our entire history." Susan frowned. "We can't take the buildings, but maybe we can save the knowledge." "How is your data stored?" "Crystal matrices," Nira said, pointing to glowing blue columns in the central building. "Our entire civilization's history, science, art, everything we are." Susan activated her communicator. "Captain, we need to revise evacuation priorities. We need data specialists down here immediately. The Kaltorians have cultural treasures we can't leave behind." Back on the ship, Daniel looked at Elder Zoran. "We came to save your people, but we want to save who you are too. Your history, your knowledge." For the first time, Zoran's skin brightened. "Perhaps that is why it was humans who answered our call. You understand that saving lives means more than just physical rescue." Outside the conference room window, The U.S. Mercy and U.S. Compassion moved into position above the planet. The evacuation was about to begin. 5 days into the evacuation, Olivia King sat alone in the communications room, monitoring signal traffic. The work was important but routine, until a strange pattern caught her attention. "That's odd," she whispered, adjusting her equipment. The signal was weak, but definitely artificial, coming from a small moon in the Kaltorian system. She isolated the frequency and enhanced it. Words began to form in her headset, voices speaking in languages she didn't recognize, but with occasional phrases in Galactic Standard, which the Kaltorians had taught them. Humans arrived as predicted. Intervention protocol violated. Committee decision was clear. Olivia's hands trembled as she hit the ship-wide alert button. "You're certain about this?" Captain Daniel Garcia asked, studying the signal data. "Absolutely," Olivia replied. "Someone is watching us from that moon. And they're talking about us. About humans." Elder Zoran floated in his tank beside them. His skin darkened to a deep blue. "The fourth moon has no native life. No one should be there." Daniel turned to Commander Ben Lewis. "Prepare a shuttle. Small team only." "You can't be serious," Susan Wright protested. "We're in the middle of an evacuation. If someone is monitoring us, we need to know who and why," Daniel replied firmly. "Especially since they're speaking about humans specifically." The shuttle approached the small moon quietly, its sensors scanning for life forms. "I'm picking up an artificial structure," Ben reported, "hidden on the far side in a crater." Daniel nodded. "Take us in slowly." The shuttle landed a short distance from what appeared to be a small base. Daniel, Ben, Susan, and Elder Zoran, in a mobile water tank, exited, wearing protective gear. They had barely walked 50 meters when a door in the structure slid open. 3 figures emerged, each distinctly non-human. The tallest had gray skin and 4 arms. Another was insect-like with compound eyes. The third appeared almost plant-like, with bark-textured skin and leaf-like protrusions. "Vexari, Talaxian, and Merithian," Zoran whispered, his voice shaking. "All supposed allies of Kaltoria." The gray-skinned Vexari stepped forward. "This is a restricted observation post. Your presence is unauthorized." Daniel stood his ground. "We're here to rescue the Kaltorians. What are you doing here?" "Monitoring an evolving situation," replied the Vexari coldly. Susan moved forward. "You received their distress call. Why didn't you help them?" The 3 aliens exchanged glances. The insect-like Talaxian clicked its mandibles before speaking. The non-intervention agreement was clear. The Kaltorian extinction event was classified as natural progress. Zoran surged against the glass of his tank. "Natural. We have traded with you for centuries. We share our knowledge with you." The plant-like Merithian spoke, its voice rustling like leaves. "The committee determined that human development must proceed without witnessing major interstellar operations. Your species is still being evaluated." A terrible understanding dawned on Daniel's face. "You let the Kaltorians send their distress call, knowing no one would answer. You wanted to see if humans would respond. Your species was not expected to possess the technological capability," the Vexari admitted. "When you developed fold space technology sooner than projected, we established this monitoring station. You were going to let 50,000 people die for a sociological experiment." Susan's voice shook with rage. "The Kaltorians are not the first," the Talaxian stated flatly. "Many developing worlds must be allowed to follow their natural path, even to extinction." Ben stepped forward, hand moving toward his weapon. "How many others? How many civilizations have you sacrificed for your observations?" The Merithian raised a bark-covered arm. "This conversation is finished. Return to your rescue attempt if you wish, but know that human interference in galactic affairs will have consequences." The 3 aliens retreated into their facility, leaving the humans and Zoran standing in stunned silence. "All this time," Zoran whispered, "we thought we were part of a community of worlds. But we were just subjects to them. Daniel put his hand on Zoran's tank. Not to us. To humans, your people worth saving. As they returned to the shuttle, Susan's communicator beeped urgently. It was Harold Wilson from the ship. Captain, his voice crackled through. You need to return immediately. We've detected seismic activity on Kaltoria. The planet is destabilizing faster than we predicted. And we've picked up multiple ships entering the system. The shuttle docked with the U.S. Hope as violent tremors shook Kaltoria below. On the bridge, Harold Wilson pointed to the planet scan displayed on the main screen. The core is becoming unstable, he explained, his face grim. We have less than a week before the planet becomes completely uninhabitable, maybe only days before the underwater cities begin to collapse. Captain Daniel Garcia looked at the evacuation numbers. After 5 days of non-stop work, they had managed to transport just over 15,000 Kaltorians to the 3 ships. We need to speed up, he ordered. Double the shuttle runs. Use every available space. Elder Zoran, who had joined them on the bridge, spoke up. Captain, I have consulted with our council. We have made a decision. His voice was steady but sad. The elders will remain behind. Our places on your ships will go to the younger generations. That's not acceptable, Daniel said firmly. It is the only logical choice, Zoran replied. Our species must survive, even if some of us cannot. Susan Wright stepped forward. There has to be another way. In the engineering bay of the U.S. Compassion, Harold Wilson gathered his team. The chief engineer's eyes were red from lack of sleep, but his mind was still sharp. The ship wasn't designed for this, he explained, pointing to schematics on his tablet. But if we strip out all non-essential components, crew quarters, recreation areas, even parts of the propulsion system, we could create space for maybe 10,000 more Kaltorians. The ship would barely be functional, warned his assistant. It doesn't need to be pretty, Harold replied. It just needs to get them home. On the surface, the evacuation had become chaotic. Rising temperatures caused structural failures in the underwater cities. Kaltorian families waited in long lines to board human shuttles, carrying only what they could hold. Mary Peterson worked with Kaltorian children, helping them into specially designed water tanks. It's going to be okay, she told them, though she wasn't sure if they understood her words. They seemed to respond to her calming tone, their skin colors shifting from distressed dark blues to lighter hues. Nearby, Alan Miller, who had first received the Kaltorian signal, coordinated the data retrieval team. They worked frantically to download thousands of years of Kaltorian history, art, and science from crystal storage matrices. We've got about 60% of the main library, he reported to Susan over the communicator. But the power systems are failing. We're losing access to the deeper archives. A violent shake threw everyone off balance. Water began pouring through cracks in the city dome. Everyone out now, Susan shouted. Get to the shuttles. Back on the U.S. Hope, Daniel studied the long-range sensors with growing concern. The approaching ships had been identified as a Vexeri fleet, 15 vessels in total, all heavily armed. Time to their arrival, he asked Ben Lewis. 3 hours, maybe less. Daniel turned to Olivia. Any response to our hails? She shook her head. Just one message repeated. Cease your interference in galactic affairs. The fate of the Kaltorians is not your concern. Elder Zoran, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. They're coming to stop the rescue. His skin had turned almost black with despair. After condemning us to die, they now wish to ensure it happens. Daniel looked around at his exhausted crew, then back at the planet where shuttles continued their frantic evacuation runs. Send a message to the U.S. Mercy and U.S. Compassion, he ordered. As soon as they reach 80% capacity, they need to depart immediately. Tell Harold to finish the modifications on the Compassion as quickly as possible. What about the Hope? Asked Ben. Daniel's expression was resolute. We'll stay until the last possible moment. I won't leave anyone behind who can be saved." As if in response to his words, another tremor shook Kaltoria, larger than any before. On the view screen, they watched in horror as an entire section of the largest underwater city collapsed. "Get every available shuttle down there now," Daniel commanded. "We're running out of time." The U.S. Mercy disappeared into fold space with a flash of light, carrying over 18,000 Kaltorians to safety. On the bridge of the U.S. Hope, Captain Daniel Garcia watched as the heavily modified U.S. Compassion prepared for departure. "Compassion reports ready for jump, Captain," Olivia announced. "They've managed to fit nearly 24,000 Kaltorians aboard." "Tell them to go," Daniel ordered. "We'll follow with the rest once the final shuttles return." On the main screen, the approaching Vexeri fleet was now clearly visible. 15 warships in perfect formation. 1 hour until they're in weapons range, Ben warned. Daniel nodded grimly. "That's cutting it close." The U.S. Compassion vanished into fold space just as the last shuttles lifted off from Kaltoria's surface. Below, the ocean had begun to boil in some regions, sending massive clouds of steam into the atmosphere. "Final evacuation count?" Daniel asked. 8,347 on board the Hope," Susan replied. "That's everyone we could reach." Her voice caught slightly. "We couldn't save them all, Daniel." "We saved more than anyone else tried to," he said quietly. Suddenly, Olivia straightened at her station. "Captain, new contacts appearing." 3 massive ships emerged from fold space directly between the U.S. Hope and the approaching Vexeri fleet. Their design was unlike anything the humans had seen before, elegant curves of what looked like living metal. "They're hailing us," Olivia reported, surprise evident in her voice. "On screen," Daniel ordered. The image of a tall, crystalline being appeared. It had no mouth, but a soft voice emanated from it. "I am Zeth of the Araxian Republic. We have been observing." The crystal being seemed to shimmer. "We find your actions interesting." Before Daniel could respond, the lead Vexeri ship also opened communications. The same gray-skinned, 4-armed alien from the moon appeared. "This is a violation of galactic protocol," the Vexeri commander stated. "The humans must not interfere with the natural progression of events." Zeth's crystalline form rotated slightly toward the Vexeri. "Natural. There is nothing natural about abandoning allies to die when you have the means to save them," the committee decided. The Vexeri began. "We are not part of your committee," Zeth interrupted. "The Araxian Republic observes from a distance, but we intervene when justice demands it." The crystal being turned back to Daniel. "Complete your rescue, Captain. We will ensure you are not disturbed." The Vexeri ships halted their advance as the 3 Araxian vessels held position between them and the U.S. Hope. "Thank you," Daniel said simply. Zeth's crystal form seemed to brighten. "Perhaps the galaxy has misjudged humanity. You risk everything for strangers when advanced civilizations do nothing. That is remarkable." 5 months later, the Earth fleet returned home. The journey back had been difficult. Ships overcrowded, supplies stretched thin, but they had made it. The Kaltorians were welcomed as refugees on Earth. Scientists discovered they could thrive in Earth's oceans and large lakes, where they began building new underwater communities. 1 year after the rescue, a ceremony was held on the shores of Lake Superior, where the largest Kaltorian settlement, New Kaltoria, had been established. Elder Zoran, who had ultimately been convinced to evacuate, addressed the gathered humans and Kaltorians. "When everyone ignored our plea, only humans showed up," he said, his voice carrying across the water. "The advanced species called you primitive, yet you showed something they had lost: compassion. You saved not just our lives, but our knowledge, our history, our future." In the audience, Captain Daniel Garcia, now Admiral Garcia, sat next to Mary Peterson, who had remained as liaison to the Kaltorians. His communicator beeped with a message. "The Araxian ships have entered Earth orbit," it read. They bring an official invitation for Earth to join the Araxian Consensus, an alliance of worlds who believe in mutual aid regardless of technological development. Daniel smiled as he watched Kaltorian children playing in the shallows with human children, learning each other's games. "What do you think they'll call us in their history books?" Mary asked. Daniel thought for a moment. "I hope they just call us friends." Above them, barely visible in the bright blue sky, the crystalline ships of the Araxians glittered like stars, a promise that humanity's compassion had opened a new chapter in their journey among the stars.